Day one of NBA free agency has pretty much finished up, and we saw tons of money being dished out yesterday. So I'm going to be grading all the NBA free agency moves so far. Like always, I always want to hear your guys' opinions in the comments. So please let me know what's your favorite and least favorite signings so far in free agency. So the first one I want to talk about is Jerami Grant going to the Portland Trail Blazers. 5 years, $160 million. Man, Jerami Grant is going to make over $240 million in the NBA by the time he's 34. He was so smart with this. He knew the leverage he had with Portland. They wanted to win with Damian Lillard. They didn't really have any other flexibility with their salary cap to use in free agency. He knew that the Trailblazers had to pony up a decent amount of money for him not to leave Portland. So he did just that, getting $32 million for Jerami Grant, which is just kind of crazy when you think about it. Some other forwards that are making similar amount of money: Jason Tatum at $32 million, Pascal Siakam $37 million, Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. $27 million, Julius Randle $28 million. Yeah, Randle's gonna be making $4 million less than Jerami Grant. Heck, Jerami Grant's gonna be making $10 million more a year than Aaron Gordon, and Aaron Gordon is probably the perfect version of Jerami Grant and what you want in a team that you're still building around Damian Lillard. I'm gonna give this, honestly, an F. Yeah, I don't love this signing. Now, in a vacuum, could it help the Blazers next year? For sure. The year after? Yeah. I don't think this contract is going to age well, and I don't know if it's going to be a tradable contract as well, unless Jerami Grant really hits his stride to prove that he's worth $32 million a year on the offensive and defensive end. Because let's say Dame doesn't work out in Portland, we'll say next year, right? They try it for this upcoming season, it doesn't work out, and then Dame gets traded in the offseason of 2024. Who's going to want to pay Jerami Grant $128 million over the next 4 years? I don't know if it's even going to be a tradable contract, so that's why I don't really love this long term. Portland really didn't have any other choice, but it's still a bad contract in my opinion. I do think it's an overpay for Jerami Grant. I don't think it's going to age well in years 4 and 5 of his deal. I don't think his kind of play style is going to age well either, because if his defense really drops off and his shooting doesn't stay consistent or really doesn't improve over the next 5 years, it's not going to look like a great contract. I just wish Portland did a sign and trade with Jerami Grant. Obviously, I wish they traded Damian Lillard and just build around Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and Shaedon Sharpe, but that doesn't seem like the route they're going with. Next up, we got Fred VanVleet, who got a 3-year deal worth $128 million from the Houston Rockets. This is also worth $43 million a year for Fred VanVleet. He's going to be making $15 million more per year than Jalen Brunson, which is just wild to think about. He actually got more money per year than Kyrie Irving did from the Dallas Mavericks. And Kyrie Irving is still a much better point guard than Fred VanVleet, in my opinion. So Houston had to pay up extra money to bring Fred VanVleet from Toronto to Houston. Also, Houston had to spend $67 million this offseason, so they had to dish out this money somewhere, and they weren't getting a Khris Middleton or it looks like a Kyle Kuzma or Draymond Green. So was this an overpay? Yes, but Houston really had to spend this money, and for a 3-year deal at somebody that's 29, this isn't the worst contract in my opinion. Yes, it's an overpay, but Fred VanVleet, championship experience. They needed a veteran in this locker room, and he could be a great mentor for their number 1 pick in Amen Thompson, who might take a little bit of time to develop as a true lead point guard. So Fred VanVleet can be that guy that can mentor him, take him under his wing, and help progress Amen Thompson. And yeah, I don't hate like the full terms of this contract. Do I hate the annual value? Yes, of course, anybody would. But for 3 years, this isn't the worst thing. I'm giving it a B letter grade. And the Rockets don't have their first round pick if it's not in the bottom 4 next year. And I'm sure they don't want to be a bottom 4 team once again. So Fred VanVleet's going to help them win games. I'm sure they want to be in the play-in tournament. They still have $25 million left to spend after this signing. So yeah, that's why I'm giving it a B. It's only 3 years. He's 29. You'll get him till he's 32. He can also be a point guard or shooting guard. We've seen him as a 1 in the past few years in Toronto. But when Kyle Lowry was there, especially on that championship team in 2019, we saw a lot of Fred VanVleet at the shooting guard spot. So we could see some Amen at the 1, Fred VanVleet at the 2 lineups, or we could see Fred VanVleet at the 1, Jalen Green at the 2 lineups. So I think he'll buy in also under Ime Udoka's defensive system. I don't hate this signing, but I don't love it. We got Kyrie Irving, who got 3 years, $126 million from the Dallas Mavericks. I mentioned that before. I don't really know if Dallas was bidding against any other team. So did they maybe overpay by a few million? Sure, but they had to bring back Kyrie Irving. They gave up a future first round pick and their best defender last year in Dorian Finney-Smith, also one of their better bench players in Spencer Dinwiddie. So they gave up a decent amount to get Kyrie Irving to not even make the play-in tournament. It was an utter embarrassment for Dallas, but they were able to get off Davis Bertans' contract on draft night, pick up Derek Lively, a good defensive center prospect. They were able to take on Rashawn Holmes' contract later in the first round and draft Olivia Maxence Prosper from the first round pick from the Sacramento Kings. So I like what Dallas did on draft night, and yeah, this is something they had to do. I'm actually going to give this a B+ for Dallas because I think they had to bring back Kyrie Irving 100% for $42 million a year. I mean, it's not even that crazy. Like, Tyrese Halliburton is going to be making $50 million on his rookie max extension. So $42 million for still a top 10 point guard in the NBA is not bad by any means. You're going to be getting Kyrie's probably last 3 good years as an elite point guard in this league. You'll get him at 31, 32, and 33. I'm sure his play is going to drop off a little bit towards the end of the contract, but it's something you had to do around Luka Doncic. You bring him back, you have a little bit more continuity. Hopefully Kyrie buys into the system under Jason Kidd for the next 3 years, and yeah, him and Luka can coexist. I like what Dallas has done this offseason. They still have a lot of work to do, but bringing back Kyrie was a good step in the right direction. Cameron Johnson got paid, man. 4 years, $108 million. $27 million for Cameron Johnson is 100% an overpay in my opinion, but Brooklyn had to do it. Brooklyn does not own many of their future first-round picks over the next 3 years due to the James Harden trade back at the 2021 season when that didn't really work out too much. So bringing back Cameron Johnson was a must. I'm sure they were going to match any other deal if Houston or Detroit threw the bag at Cam Johnson. I'm going to give this a B signing because Cam Johnson is 27, so you're getting him in his prime, one of the better three-point shooters in the league. For $27 million, it does seem like a lot. I do wonder if we're going to see a major move from Brooklyn over the next maybe couple of months. Like, they're going to have to pay Mikal Bridges in a year or two. Same with Nick Claxton next offseason. But yeah, this Nets team isn't the best on paper, but they're trying to make the playoffs next year since they don't have their first round pick. It goes to Houston. So yeah, like Cameron Johnson, like this contract is definitely a little bit of an overpay in my opinion, but the NBA salary cap's going up, so probably it's not going to look that bad. It's just like he's making the same amount of money as like a Julius Randle. He's making more than Jalen Brunson. So you can love that contract, you can hate it. I'm kind of in the middle here. Kyle Kuzma got $25.5 million a year from the Washington Wizards. I kind of like this from the Wizards standpoint. I'm actually going to give this an A signing. Now the Wizards, would I have liked them to tank next year? Yeah, obviously, but bringing Kyle Kuzma can only be a really good trade piece down the line at the worst case scenario, and it's nice to have some continuity on a team and keep a guy for a few seasons, as Kuzma's been there for already 2 now. Is $25 million a lot for Kuzma? Not really. Like, that's $2 million less than Cameron Johnson. He's at the same age, and you could say, okay, I prefer Kuzma, I prefer Johnson, but I think it's right in the ballpark of what he's going to get. They do have a lot of forwards there in Washington that I want to see get a decent amount of playing time and shots up next year with Kuzma, Kispert, now Bilal Koulibaly. They also have Denny Avdija and Johnny Davis. They also picked up Jordan Poole this offseason, who's going to get a ton of shots next year. So I don't really know how Wes Unseld is going to allocate these touches, but it will be interesting to see in Washington. I do expect them to not make the play-in tournament next year, as some teams got a lot better and they definitely got a lot worse this offseason. But I like this for Washington because, like I said, at worst, it could be a trade asset next offseason. Khris Middleton re-signed on the Milwaukee Bucks, 3 years, $102 million. It's another B for me. Like, they had to do this. It's crazy though, because 32 years old Khris Middleton, he hasn't been healthy over the last 2 seasons. This contract's going to run until he's basically 35. I think it's going to age a little poorly, but he's going to be a Buck for most of his career. You had to do this to keep Giannis happy and to keep the Bucks relevant in Giannis's prime years. So yeah, they had to do it. Was it a little bit overpay? I don't know though, because like the way the NBA salary cap is going, these contracts like $30 million is kind of what you're going to get if you're not a star player, but if you're not like a mid-level player. Like, that's pretty much where the middle is, which is crazy because the top end guys are getting $50 and $60 million, man. It really makes me wish I was an NBA player. Draymond Green back to the Warriors, 4 years, $100 million. I'm actually giving this an A. This is $25 million a year for Draymond Green. And if you're seeing what Jerami Grant got at like $32 million a year, who is 4 years younger than Draymond, so like I'll give him that. But I think like Draymond's still one of the best defenders in the NBA, like top 5 defenders still. You got to keep him as a Warrior for his whole career. This is going to bring him till his age 37 season, so you're going to think he's going to retire as a Warrior. So good on Draymond getting another $100 million guaranteed as a second round pick back from the 2012 draft, and the Warriors had to bring back one of the better defenders in the league. The Toronto Raptors gave Jakob Poeltl $80 million over 4 years. I'm going to give this a C+. I think Jakob Poeltl is a fine defender. I still think he leaves a lot to be desired on the offensive end, and $20 million for a center that can't really space the floor is a little bit rich, for my opinion. That's the way like I would allocate this money. But Toronto still wants to stay competitive. They got outbid on Fred VanVleet. I don't expect them to move Siakam or OG Anunoby now, so they didn't really have any other choice. Jakob Poeltl is 27 though, so he's going into his prime. I think he can continue to get better and better. Like I said, pretty solid defender, not the best offensive center in the world compared to some of these other guys. But yeah, maybe I'd just rather allocate that $20 million elsewhere. Nikola Vucevic also got $20 million a year over 3 years from the Chicago Bulls a few days ago. I'm going to give this a C. Good on Vucevic. I actually think he's worth $20 million as a player. I just don't really know what Chicago is doing. At least Toronto has a young stud that they're building around and a all-NBA caliber player in Pascal Siakam to think that they have a higher ceiling than maybe they actually do. For Chicago, one of their better players, DeMar DeRozan, is an expiring deal. He's not getting any younger. Zach LaVine making a ton of money. He's been in trade rumors also, but it looks like Chicago is just entering that NBA purgatory. They didn't have their lottery pick that went to the Orlando Magic that ended up being Jett Howard. They have their first round pick next year, but it's probably looking like they're going to be around like the 13th overall pick to 18th overall pick range. I don't see the Chicago team being a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. If you look at it on paper, are they better than Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, New York, Cleveland? I don't think so. And I would even say Philadelphia, depending on what happens with James Harden. $20 million is a lot for Vucevic, but yeah, it could be a trade asset at the deadline or next year. Max Strus just got $63 million guaranteed from the Cleveland Cavaliers in a sign and trade. I actually was a fan of this pickup, so I'm going to give this a B+ for Cleveland. They needed some defense in the playoffs and somebody that could space the floor and hit spot-up threes when you have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland doing their own thing with the ball, and I think that he is an upgrade over Cedi Osman, and I think it's justified that it is a $6 to $7 million upgrade. That's just what the NBA is becoming. Like, $6 to $7 million is not a lot by any means. The mid-level exception is $12.4 million, which would be like a rich price in any other sport. So yeah, I was a fan of it. All right, a couple of other free agency signings we'll kind of do rapid fire here. Herb Jones, team option was declined from the Pelicans. Shout out to the Pelicans for doing this, not giving him $2 million this year. They declined it so they can give him more money. 4 years, $53 million, around $13 million a year. I'm giving this an A. I think this is great value for Herb Jones, one of the league's more underrated defenders. He's still only 24 years old. I would say he's even better than Max Strus and got like $10 million less, so I'm giving this an A. Bruce Brown got $45 million from the Indiana Pacers for 2 years. This was definitely a shocker, but it's a team option on the second year. Indiana is not a big market team, so they do have to overpay a little bit for these guys, but Bruce Brown is going to help the Pacers hopefully get back into the playoffs or at least the play-in tournament next year. So I'm going to be giving this an A just because it's a one-year deal, which leaves no risk to this. And if Bruce Brown plays well and Indiana makes the play-in tournament as like the 7th or 8th seed, they can pick up that team option and go forward. Rui Hachimura got $51 million over 3 years from the LA Lakers, and I do think this is a little bit of an overpay, but he was a restricted free agent, so you know it makes sense there. Rui definitely played a lot better going next to one of the best players of all time in LeBron James, so I do think that helped his play a lot. I'm actually going to give this signing a C. I like what the Lakers did in some other moves, and like one of those other moves, Gabe Vincent, 3 years, $33 million. I'm going to give this a B. Gabe Vincent's a good player. I did not expect him to go to the Lakers. He's a good defender. Hell, he really turned it up a notch in the playoffs for the Miami Heat. So I hope Lakers fans are a little bit patient with him because there's going to be some inefficient games in November and December, and don't give up on him. He's a good playoff performer. Coby White got $33 million over 3 years from the Chicago Bulls. I'm going to give this a B as well. I like Coby White as a player, and I want to see him get more touches because I think he could be an efficient 2 guard. It's just like behind Zach LaVine and behind DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, and you want to give touches and shots to Patrick Williams and Dalen Terry. I would assume they just signed Javon Carter. It's just kind of tough for Coby White to get 12 to 14 shots a night, where I think he could be an efficient shooting guard, but in Chicago, I don't know if it's going to work out. I actually think $11 million is good value. I just don't know if it's going to work out in Chicago. So those were moves that I wanted to talk about. Let me know in the comments any moves that I didn't mention that you really liked under the radar. Maybe it was Seth Curry back to the Dallas Mavericks from a few years ago, or it was Dennis Schroeder going to the Toronto Raptors. We still got to wait in here on Brook Lopez, Dylan Brooks, Russell Westbrook, Dante DiVincenzo. We'll see where James Harden goes in this trade from the 76ers. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'm going to be making videos reacting to all those moves. Thank you guys once again for 100,000 subscribers on the channel. I love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.